Hi grade 8s, this is part 4 of our video series on writing a 5-paragraph persuasive essay. Now that you've written your introductory paragraph, including a hook and a thesis statement, it's time to think about writing the body paragraphs. Following the introductory paragraph, your essay will have 3 body paragraphs. Each of these body paragraphs focuses on developing one of the arguments mentioned in your thesis statement. Before writing anything, you always need to know what you're aiming for. So here are the success criteria for writing a brilliant body paragraph. First off, your paragraph should follow the power writing format. Your paragraph should also focus on only one clear argument. Your paragraph should include 3 relevant and specific pieces of evidence from your research, and you elaborate or discuss each piece of evidence. You should use strong and interesting language as well as subject-specific vocabulary. You make use of sentence starters and transition words, and finally, your spelling and grammar are correct. There's one thing I really want to stress that you really need to pay attention to. For one body paragraph, you're only talking about one of your arguments. And when you're choosing the wording and content for each body paragraph, you want to make sure that the paragraphs are clearly separate and distinct, with no overlap. That will make it obvious to the reader that each paragraph has a different focus. This is important because if there is too much overlap between 2 of your body paragraphs, if they seem too similar, this makes a reader think that you haven't done enough research or put enough thought into your essay. The reader will think that you just ran out of stuff to say and had to repeat yourself. And when writing a persuasive essay, you don't want to give the reader any reason to doubt you because you want to convince them. Now, you've already done the work of organizing the ideas and details from your research using a graphic organizer like this one. This is actually going to be really helpful when you go to write your body paragraphs. The first column in the organizer with argument 1 and the 3 pieces of evidence will form the basis for one body paragraph. The information in the next column will go into another body paragraph, and the information in the third column will be used to write the third body paragraph. To write an actual body paragraph, we're going to use a graphic organizer like this one. So we're using a Power 11 format, meaning that each body paragraph will have up to 11 sentences. I can't stress enough how useful this graphic organizer is when you're writing a body paragraph. It lets you organize your argument, evidence, and details so that it all flows logically for a reader. You're going to fill out 3 of these graphic organizers, 1 for each body paragraph. Let's look at how you would fill out such an organizer for one body paragraph. Up at the top, in the P1 position, is where you jot down your ideas for your topic sentence. This is going to be the main argument for this paragraph, and you stick to this for the entire paragraph. In the middle of the graphic organizer, you have slots for the P2 sentences. The first one here is where you record the first piece of evidence that you're going to use to back up your argument. Remember, you can use a variety of information from your research as evidence, things like facts, statistics, quotes from experts, and relevant anecdotes or stories of things that have happened to people in real life. Following the Power 2 sentence, you have 1 or 2 Power 3 sentences. Here they're called 3A and 3B. This is where you elaborate on or add details about the piece of evidence that you've just mentioned. In the next slot for a P2 sentence, you record your second piece of evidence supporting your argument, and then jot down ideas in the following P3 slots about how you will elaborate or add detail. I'm going to stress again because it's important. The P3 sentences always relate to the P2 sentence right before them. You repeat this process one more time for your third and last piece of evidence. And again, your Power 3 sentences will always relate back to the piece of evidence right in front of them. The final Power 1 sentence at the bottom of the organizer is where you record your ideas about what you want to say in the concluding sentence for the paragraph. This sentence does a couple of things. First, it should tie up everything you've talked about in this paragraph. Second, it should clearly refer back to or link to your thesis statement. You're telling your reader exactly how the information in this paragraph supports your opinion. To go from the graphic organizer to the actual paragraph, each of the entries in the organizer becomes a sentence in the paragraph. But it's important that they go in a specific order so that your ideas flow logically for your reader. Your first Power 1 sentence is your topic sentence, so of course it's the first sentence in your paragraph. Sentence 2 is where you state your first piece of evidence, and you get this information from the first P2 slot in your organizer. The two linked Power 3 sentences, 3A and 3B, come next because they provide more detail about your piece of evidence and explain why it's important. After your first set of Power 3 sentences, you're finished talking about your first piece of evidence, so you jump back over to your second Power 2 sentence. This becomes sentence 5 in your paragraph, and it's where you state your second piece of evidence. Again, this is followed by 1 or 2 Power 3 sentences, which will become sentences 6 and 7 in your paragraph, and this is where you would elaborate. Your final P2 sentence, your last piece of evidence, becomes the 8th sentence in your paragraph, again followed by 1 or 2 Power 3 sentences for elaboration. Your last sentence is the final Power 1 sentence in the organizer. Potentially, this is sentence 11 in your paragraph, assuming you've used all of the possible Power 3 sentences when elaborating. Now I'm going to show you how to actually fill out the graphic organizer for the model essay that I've been working on. Remember, the prompt for this essay is it okay for someone to clone a pet?
So here's the graphic organizer that we'll use for all of our body paragraphs. And you can see it's just a regular Power 11 organizer. Right now, we're going to fill it in like we're getting ready to write body paragraph number 1. My first argument in this essay that I'm going to use is that techniques involved in cloning pets cause animal suffering. I think that's my strongest argument, so I'm going to talk about it in body paragraph number 1. And because it's the argument for this paragraph, I'm going to type it in right here. So animal suffering. My first piece of evidence to back up this argument that I found in my research is that cloning requires a number of invasive procedures. And I'll type that right here in my first P2 sentence. So for example, I found out that you need an egg donor animal, plus you need a surrogate. Okay. Now for my P3 sentences here, I'll need to elaborate about why this is a problem or why this is harmful to the animals. So in my first sentence, I'll talk about how there are risks involved in any surgery. In particular, I know can be problems due to anesthesia, and I hope I'm spelling that right. Plus, there can also be problems with infection. In my next sentence, I'll point out that for every clone, you have at least 2 animals undergoing surgeries that they didn't need for their own health. I want to point out that I'm using point form to fill out the organizer. There's no reason to waste your time trying to squeeze full sentences in here. Point form is enough to help you put your ideas in a logical order, and that's all this organizer is for. I'm not going to take time here to fill in the whole graphic organizer, but I've shared a completed version with you for you to take a look. So here's the finished paragraph that I wrote based on the graphic organizer that we worked on together. And we're going to give this a read through so you get an idea of how you can move from the graphic organizer to a finished paragraph. I've turned on a little bit of a spotlight here because I know this is a whole bunch of words on the screen, and I wanted to make it easier for you to follow me when I read it. So here we go. Cloning a pet results in needless suffering by animals who are unwilling participants in the whole process. To begin with, at least 2 of the steps needed to produce a clone are incredibly invasive, requiring surgery. Specifically, eggs must be collected from a female donor animal. Then, once a cloned embryo is created, it must be implanted in another female who acts as a surrogate mother. Any surgeries come with risks due to the effects of anesthesia or the possibility of infection. So choosing to clone a pet means endangering the health of at least 2 other animals. To make matters worse, the whole process must typically be repeated a number of times in order to produce a healthy clone, meaning that a much higher number of animals are actually affected. For example, it took 2 attempts before one woman, Karina Karatis, received a clone of her Cocker Spaniel baby in 2017. That, however, could be considered a rather positive outcome because according to Robert Klitzman, director of bioethics at Columbia University, the cloning of dogs has a success rate of 20%, meaning that only 1 attempt out of 5 produces a viable clone. Finally, in addition to undergoing surgery, the female animals used to produce a clone must receive hormonal injections as part of the process. Again, these injections are not benefiting or improving the health of these animals in any way, and instead can have negative health consequences when repeatedly administered. As a result, even though a grieving pet owner like Miss Caritas may feel that having a clone of her dog was like reconnecting with her original pet, engendering a profound feeling of love, it is still evident that the cost of cloning is too high when the pain and suffering of affected animals is taken into consideration. Now, couple things I'd like to point out, but first, I want to get rid of this highlight if I can. There, that's better. First of all, I've made use of transition words and phrases to help guide the reader. Just to give an example, right here, I put the phrase "to begin with" to show the reader that that is the first piece of evidence that I'm going to use to back up my argument. Later on, I use the word specifically, I'll highlight that as well, to point out to the reader that I'm going to go into more detail. If you read through the paragraph, you'll find several more places where I've used transition words and phrases to guide the reader and to make my ideas flow well. So that's point 1. Point 2, once you write your rough copy, you always go over it and revise and edit. I've certainly done that here. This is not my first version of this paragraph. So you always go over your work, making sure that all of your sentences are grammatically correct and that they flow smoothly and logically. You also want to check your spelling. If you present a piece of writing that's full of errors, even if you don't mean to, you're signaling to your reader that you didn't really care about your work, that you didn't take it seriously. And again, if you're trying to persuade a reader, which you are, that's not what you want them thinking.
So now it's your turn. You're ready to write 3 amazing body paragraphs. And yes, it will make you this happy. A quick look at any resources used in making this video, and that's it till next time.